Welcome to my Learn English YouTube channel. Before we begin today's session, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more valuable content like this.
Okay, so you want to improve your spoken English.
Always a popular topic.
Yeah, it comes up a lot, right?
Sure.
We're going to deep dive on this topic today.
Sounds good.
And we're going to do it using this YouTube video that I found really interesting.
Okay.
It's called Best Way to Learn Spoken English.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by Alina Race.
I've heard of her.
Yeah, she's got a really popular channel. And this video is actually in Hindi.
Oh, wow.
But, I don't speak Hindi, but
Right.
I watched it with subtitles.
Okay.
And I thought that it had some really interesting points that were pretty universal,
Huh. That makes sense. Yeah.
So I thought we could dive into that, and I think it'll be valuable even if you're not specifically learning English.
I'm sure it will.
So the main idea of the video is this idea that we should stop dissecting English
Okay.
and just start speaking it.
Interesting.
So many people get caught up in, all the rules, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the grammar and the
you
vocabulary.
can be kind of bogged down in the mechanics, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of lose sight of the whole point, which is to actually communicate,
Yeah.
right?
That's very true.
Like I remember when I was learning, I was trying to learn Spanish, and I would get so nervous about ordering food
Oh, yeah.
because I was like, I'm going to mess up the grammar
Right.
and they're not going to understand me and it's going to be so embarrassing.
It can be so intimidating.
Right. And then I realized
Mm-hmm.
even if I make mistakes, people still understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And it's more important to just get the message across.
Right. Like actually communicate rather than being perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what Alina is getting at in this video.
Yeah.
And it's funny because she uses this analogy. She's like,
Oh.
don't learn English in pieces. How can you learn a language in pieces?
Mm.
Did you learn Hindi in pieces?
Oh, that's a good point.
And it's true, right?
Right.
We don't learn our native languages by dissecting all the grammar rules first, right?
Yeah. It's more about immersion and just trying to communicate and not being afraid to make mistakes.
Right. Think about how little kids learn to talk.
Yeah.
They just start babbling and imitating, and they don't care if they get it wrong.
Exactly. They're just trying to get their point across.
And so they learn.
It's natural, isn't it?
It is, and I think we kind of lose that as we get older.
Yeah, we get self-conscious
Yeah.
and we start to overthink things.
Yeah, and we're afraid of making mistakes,
Exactly.
which is ironic because making mistakes is actually how we learn.
Absolutely.
So what would you say to someone who's listening to this and they're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this all sounds great, but I still feel like I need to learn the grammar rules.
Yeah, that's a common concern.
How can they kind of balance those two approaches?
I think it's not about ignoring grammar completely.
Right.
It's about shifting the focus.
Okay.
So instead of starting with grammar rules and vocabulary lists,
Okay.
start by immersing yourself in the language.
Okay.
Start by listening to native speakers. Try to speak as much as possible, even if you make mistakes.
So it's more about getting comfortable with the language.
Exactly. Yeah, get a feel for it.
Yeah.
And then you can start to refine your grammar and vocabulary later on.
Okay. So kind of learn by doing.
Exactly. It's like learning an instrument. You don't start with music theory. You start by picking up the instrument and making some sounds.
Right. And getting a feel for it.
And then you can learn the theory to refine your technique.
So what are some practical tips that people can use to kind of put this into practice?
Well, one thing that I find really helpful is shadowing.
Okay. What's shadowing?
So you listen to a native speaker and you try to mimic their pronunciation and intonation in real time.
Oh, interesting.
It's like a workout for your tongue and your ears.
It makes sense.
Yeah, and it helps you to internalize the rhythms and the sounds of the language.
Okay. I like that.
You can also try narrating your daily activities in English.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Just talk to yourself.
Out loud.
Yeah. And don't worry about making mistakes. Just get those words flowing.
And are there any other resources or tools that you recommend?
Well, there are tons of great resources available online and offline. You can
Right.
find language partners. You can join conversation groups.
Great.
You can watch movies and TV shows in English.
Hmm.
You can listen to podcasts.
Of course.
There's really no shortage of options.
So it's really about finding what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. And being consistent.
Consistency is key.
Absolutely.
So to wrap up what we've talked about today,
Yeah.
we've been talking about this idea of shifting from a bottom-up approach to language learning,
Right.
where you start with the grammar and the vocabulary
Mhm.
to a more top-down approach,
Exactly.
where you prioritize communication and fluency
And immersion.
and immersion. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the idea is that by doing this,
Yeah.
you'll actually be able to learn the language more effectively
Yeah, I think so.
and enjoy the process more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners today.
So as you're thinking about all of this, ask yourself what's one small step that you can take today to immerse yourself in English
Good question.
and to practice speaking, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Yeah, every little bit counts.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive,
My pleasure.
and we'll see you next time.
See you later.